All right, let's get right into it. We are going on a journey today, not just into a forge, but deep into the heart of Japanese warrior culture. We're going to explore the ancient art of making a katana, a process that takes simple black sand and turns it into, well, not just a weapon, but the legendary soul of a samurai.
You know, there's this famous saying from the great shogun Tokugawa Ieyasu. The sword is the soul of the samurai. And he wasn't being poetic. It really wasn't just a tool. It was seen as a sacred part of them, a symbol of their honor, their discipline. So to really get the warrior, you first have to understand how their most prized possession was created. So we have to start here, with this idea that the katana is so much more than a sharp piece of metal. It's a massive cultural icon, it's a masterpiece of science, and it's the physical form of the samurai's spirit, their code of honor, what they called Bushido. I want you to picture the master smith. He's not just a guy banging on metal. He's more like a high priest, and this whole process is a sacred ritual. Seriously, every single step, from picking the right kind of sand to that final, gleaming polish, it's all steeped in tradition and a deep sense of reverence. This is absolutely a spiritual act. Now, if you're going to forge a legendary blade, you need some legendary metal to start with. And the story of a katana doesn't begin with iron ore dug out of a mountain. No, it starts with something way more elemental, this special black iron sand called satetsu, which they gather from rivers and shores in Japan. That sand gets smelted into this incredible, unique metal called tamahagane, and that name literally translates to jewel steel. How cool is that? This stuff is the essential ingredient. It is the raw material from which every single authentic katana is born, and just making it is this monumental task all on its own. Okay, get this. For 3 straight days and 3 nights, they feed iron, sand, and charcoal into this huge clay furnace called a tatara. And what comes out isn't some perfect, uniform block of steel. Not even close. It's this spongy bloom of metal with all these different carbon levels, full of impurities. And you know what? That's the whole point. It's a difficult, imperfect material on purpose because it forces the smith to purify it, to perfect it. Kind of like how a samurai was expected to constantly purify and perfect their own spirit. And that brings us to the most iconic part of the whole thing. This is the trial by fire. The smith chooses the best chunks of that tamahagane and starts this, well, it's like a violent, rhythmic ritual of heating, hammering, and folding, all to purify that steel and get it ready for its destiny as a blade. The whole thing is just this mesmerizing dance of fire and incredible force. You heat the steel until it's glowing like the sun. You hammer it out flat, which literally beats the impurities out of it. You fold it over on itself, and then you hammer it again, welding those 2 layers into one. And you just repeat over and over and over again. So how many times do they do this? It's an absolutely grueling process, but typically they repeat that fold about 16 times. It's just an act of incredible precision and endurance. You're not just forging steel, you're forging your own focus, your own spirit. And this is where the math just gets mind-blowing. That very first fold gives you 2 layers. Okay, simple enough. But by the 10th fold, you're at over 1,000 layers. And by the time you hit that 16th fold, the smith has created a single block of steel with over 65,000 microscopic layers. This is what distributes the carbon so perfectly and makes the steel incredibly tough and resilient. We've now arrived at the single most critical, most heart-stopping moment in this entire creation, the yaki-ire, which is the water quench. This is it. This is the blade's baptism by fire and water. Decades of a smith's experience all come down to this one irreversible moment that will either make a masterpiece or break it. Here's where the real genius of the katana lies. The smith literally paints the blade with a special, secret mixture of clay. He puts a thin layer along the cutting edge, but a really thick layer along the spine. So, when that glowing hot blade gets plunged into water, that thin clayed edge cools almost instantly, becoming unbelievably hard and sharp. But the spine, with all that thick clay, cools down slowly, staying softer and flexible so it can absorb the shock of a blow. Now think about this for a second. The blade goes into the water perfectly straight. But because that hard edge shrinks so much faster than the softer spine, this difference in cooling actually forces the blade to warp, creating that elegant, deadly curve the katana is so famous for. The curve isn't hammered in, it's literally born in that single, violent instant. So the blade has been born. But its soul is still kind of hidden. It now has to enter its final meditative stage, the polish. This is where the weapon gets transformed into a true work of art by a totally different master craftsman, the togishi, or the polisher.
And this is not just sharpening. It's a painstaking process that can take weeks, using more than a dozen different waterstones, each one finer than the last. The polisher is meticulously creating the final geometry of the blade and, in doing so, revealing its inner beauty. You start to see the hamon, which is that wavy temper line along the edge, and the hada, that subtle, almost wood-grain pattern that comes from all those thousands of folded layers.
That final polish basically reveals the entire story of the sword's creation. You can see the journey from the iron sand through the fire of the forge and the shock of the water. It's not just a tool for combat anymore. It's a chronicle of its own birth, and it's finally ready to be given to the samurai. And, that kind of leaves us with a final thought. This whole thing, it's an intimate, spiritual bond between the person who makes it and the thing that is made. In our modern world of automation and mass production, seeing this level of dedication really makes you wonder, what is the value of that human touch? And what do we lose when we separate the maker from the things they make?